West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Tonight on the Readout.
Some people say, well, they're soft on crime. No, they're not soft on crime. They're pro-crime. They want crime. They want crime because they want to take over what you got. They want to control what you have. They want reparation because they think the people that do the crime are owed that. Bull. They are not owed that.
It's October, and after a weekend of blatantly racist remarks from the right, we know it's that scary time of year. It's met by complete silence from Republican leadership, who surprisingly are in allegiance with most of these comments. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jason Johnson, and tonight for Joy Reid, we begin the Readout tonight with the shamelessly unapologetic and blatant racism and xenophobia that was on full display this weekend. Not surprisingly. Because, look, the twice impeached former president is doing a traveling roadshow around the country, and most of the offensive commentary seemed to follow him like, rats to garbage. First, it was Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville's casually racist claim that all black people are criminals, which was cheered by the crowd, and got little pushback from Republicans who refused to condemn his comments. Nebraska Republican Congressman Don Bacon suggested that Tuberville should have been more polite with his racism. Makes you wonder what kind of coach he was. Then the next day, not to be outdone, Georgia's Congresswoman said, "Hold my racist beer," and joined in on the racism, targeting immigrants.
Joe Biden's 5 million illegal aliens are on the verge of replacing you, replacing your jobs, and replacing your kids in school. And coming from all over the world, they're also replacing your culture. And that's not great for America.
Yes, Stairs and Indigenous Peoples Day. If you want to talk about replacement, Marjorie Taylor Greene, or anyone else who's complaining for that matter, you might want to take a different look at how you're thinking about these things today. Given the fact that, the entire culture of Native Americans was destroyed so that you could stand there and complain about the next group of people who are supposedly coming in. And even though Marjorie Taylor Greene isn't running for office in Arizona, her presence at the rally shows just how key her ideology is to the current form of the Republican organization. Blake Masters and Kari Lake, who actually are on the ballot in Arizona, have parroted similar talking points, claiming that Democrats want an invasion to remake the country's demographics so they can maintain power. That rhetoric is popular with a number of mass murderers who have targeted black and brown communities in Texas and New York. And while it's popular with the extremist base, it remains repugnant to most normal thinking Americans who care about gas prices and health care and abortion rights. One independent voter in Arizona recently told the New York Times, quote, "I see the racism. If you are Hispanic, if you are of a different color, it does not sit well with me." Clearly, they have a sixth sense. They see racism. On the same day that Trump was campaigning for Kari Lake, her Democratic opponent for governor, Katie Hobbs, was holding an event at the Barry Goldwater Memorial Park. Yeah, that iconic Arizona Republican with a coalition of Republicans who support her candidacy. And in Colorado, a recent poll showed that Adam Frisch, a Democrat running to unseat Lauren Boebert, is statistically tied. unaffiliated voters seem to be repulsed by Boebert's rhetoric. At this moment in Cleveland, Ohio, Congressman Tim Ryan and J.D. Vance are facing off in their first debate. Vance has spent the past few months trying to prove that he is true MAGA and not just a poser running for office by telling women that they should remain in violent marriages and enlisting Marjorie Taylor Greene on the campaign trail. While he was busy doing that, Tim Ryan was left to campaign across the state and talk about actual issues that matter to people in Ohio. Independent polls suggest the race is a toss-up 30 days out. Joining me now to discuss all of this is Democratic strategist Stephanie Brown James and Shermichael Singleton, former Republican political consultant, host of Screen Share on Peacock. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me this evening. Look, Shermichael, I'm not going to ask you the traditional question of, hey, Shermichael, you're an African-American Republican. Tell me why so many people in your party are so racist, because we already know the answer to that one, right? What I'm going to ask you is this. In our current political environment, is that effective? Is the kind of racism that you hear from Tuberville, is the kind of racism you hear from Marjorie Taylor Greene, is that effective with anybody other than hardcore MAGA voters? Because it would seem to me that if I'm an independent voter who's not motivated by just anger, I want to hear about gas prices, I want to hear about health care, I want to hear about student loans. I don't care how much you hate immigrants.
Yeah, Doc, that's a really good question. And I think looking at how close the midterms are, I think it is effective with some people in this country who identify as independents or swing voters. I would even go as far to say that there are even individuals of color who may identify as white leaning, and that may also identify with some of this rhetoric, as crazy as that may seem. You would think, Doc, when you listen to rhetoric like that, that Democrats would have a significant advantage. And we're looking at 46-47% difference, right, within margin of error. Republicans need to gain 5 seats in the House to regain it. They need just 1 seat in the Senate to take it back. These aren't significant margins. And so you have to ask yourself, it clearly isn't just, quote unquote, MAGA Republicans who are saying, I'm going to vote Republican. There are clearly some other folks in our country who are overlooking these things, Doc, for other reasons, which in my opinion is just as bad as people who are saying, I support this because I agree with it.
Well, that's true. I mean, if you've got anybody out there right now who's like, I'm okay with the racism as long as you lower my gas prices, probably not the kind of person I'd want as a neighbor. Stephanie Brown James, you are a co-founder of Collective PAC, which is an organization that goes out and raises money, helps many minority candidates run for office. One of the reasons I wanted to have you here is because when you're facing this kind of rhetoric, obviously part of the strategy is your candidate has to go out and deliver a message. But the other thing that you have to do is somehow get those people who may be, as Shermichael suggests, somewhat motivated by this rhetoric to think not in terms of cultural animus, but practical bread and butter issues. What are some of the things that you hear effective Democratic candidates saying right now when they're up against that kind of racism?
Well, it's exactly the point that you raised, Jason, and that is that we have to focus on the issues. We talk to our candidates all the time, and we focus on Black candidates that are running on a local, state, and federal level to let them know, listen, it is about the everyday experience of your neighbors, of your constituents. You have to focus on the issues, which also means that it's important to keep your ear to the ground and make sure that, you're not shying away from some of these cultural, racist situations that are happening, which oftentimes are actually targeted towards Black candidates. But you have to make the voters realize that there's a clear choice when it comes between you and what your opponent is standing for. And unfortunately, we're seeing too many times, right now we have a candidate that's running against Marjorie Taylor Greene, and we let them know, show the stark differences. If people want a racist individual representing them, saying that is the values that they uphold, then they should vote that way. But if not, you need to vote my way because I'm focused on the issues and I'm focused on making the country move forward and not move back, which is exactly what so many of these individuals who you saw on these videos are trying to do. They want us to go back so bad that they will use the same old racist, tired language and tropes to get folks thinking back 100 years and now how we can move forward together.
Now, Stephanie, I have some slight pushback on this because at a practical level, racism is a policy position. It is. True. If I'm running and saying I don't like Black people and brown people, what I am saying is that I will promote policies that will harm those people and I will promote policies that, I guess, in theory, help you over them. The racism just happens to be a shortcut. So how do you convince a white voter? I mean, let's just be absolutely real about this. How do you convince a white voter if one person is saying, hey, I've got policies that help all of Americans. They're going to replace hospitals in Georgia. We're going to improve roads in North Carolina. And the other person saying, I'm going to make sure that you get all that stuff and they don't. How do you combat that? Or is that simply not something you can do realistically with 30 days left in a campaign?
Well, the most important thing is to not shy away from it. You know, it's important that we are calling out these racist candidates and the ads and the companies that support these efforts, that we call them out. But at the same time, you know, listen, this is what unfortunately a lot of us are used to seeing. This is the same Republican tire strategy that they always use when they know that they can't relate to voters. But I can tell you that most, you know, you have a lot of independent voters. You have a lot of white voters that do not want to be put in the same bucket as racist individuals like Marjorie Taylor Greene. And you have to be able to call it out and say, listen, this person is going to advance policies that not only will take back people of color, but guess what? Especially if you're a white woman, many of these policies will impact you. If you're a person who is in the lower middle class economic structure, it's going to impact you. And that is a number of Americans who will actually be impacted by these policies that are not going to actually benefit white people in the way that these folks are saying that they will, but will actually harm them. So we can't shy away from the facts and telling that story. I mean, we encourage our candidates to stand strong, but also to make sure that they don't lose their message in the process as well.
It is Tuesday, the 11th of October of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Okay, well, it is Tuesday, and we have another day ahead of us, which I believe isn't the hearings happening today, the January 6th hearings. I have some medical issues to deal with. Well, not issues. My mom's 6-week checkup from her hip replacement surgery is this morning. So we got to hustle to get down the road to Medford to, get to her doctor's appointment right after the show. So we'll be missing a few things in the world while we're doing, the personal business that one must do. Anyway, it looks like Tommy Tuberville, coach, what a coach, he's not apologizing. He's doubling down about the people who will benefit from reparations are all criminals. Okay. Racist bigot. And that's how it is. So it sort of makes you wonder about the character of some of these people that are running on the other side. Tulsi Gabbard said that she's leaving the Democratic Party. It sounds for like all the reasons that one would leave the Republican Party, but who am I to criticize? As long as she goes. I don't care what the reason is. Yeah, we are full of anti-white racism. We hate the whites. What is she trying to say? All this wokeness. Oh, she just wants to use the N-word. All these Ners. Yeah. Okay, Tulsi, we get you. We get you. She wants to, give up on the Democratic Party. So I think so that she can spend more time with her family of Russian handlers. And they're like a family, after a period of time. So I guess she needs to spend more time with them. All right. Well, good riddance, as I like to say. And what's going to happen with Tommy Tuberville? Nothing. In fact, it sounds like he's going to be good TV. He's going to be on all the Sunday shows now. Will there be any real pushback? No. Don't need it, because that just brings down ratings, apparently. When you give the facts, apparently that doesn't sell. And news is a business now, and it needs to sell. And if you're going to be selling the news, you're going to sell what sells. Because that's how you make money. Not for the imparting of facts so that a informed electoral public can be able to make decisions on how to self-govern. If you got a bunch of idiots who don't know one whit of how their government works, all the better. Because then their representatives, their cult leader, he will make the decisions for them. Oh, that's how we like it, Daddy. Okay, well, how about all of us out here who don't really need a daddy? We'd like to self-govern without, the input of Daddy. Okay. Well, we know, I'm preaching to the choir, obviously. And we all know this. We've been warning about it for how many decades? Like when Ronnie Reagan gave his speech to announce that he was entering the fray in presidential politics for real this time. When he went to Philadelphia, Mississippi. Where the Freedom Riders were abducted and then killed. Because apparently only crooks will be getting black reparations. Only crooks. Alrighty. Or no, what he says actually is that crooks will benefit from reparations. They want to take your stuff, is what he said. They want to replace you and take your stuff. Oh my God. Coach. Okay. So we always said that there were some universities, and even in pro sports you might even be able to say it, but we'll just stick with the universities for the moment, that ran their athletic departments pretty much like a plantation system. Pretty much. So apparently he considered his black athletes, student athletes, to be nothing more than mere crooks. But, they had the bodily attributes that he needed so that he could have an annual salary that was equal to the salary of 28 tenured professors. Tuberville's annual salary as a university football coach, I looked this up, 28 tenured professors. Well, when you want to dumb down the populace, I guess when you can get a dimwit like Tuberville coaching, and, they always make out that football, American football in particular, is just, it's so complex with all of these different formations and the calls, and you got to be really intelligent to be able to play this sport. And then you got somebody like Tuberville who's making the plays. So apparently you don't need to be an Einstein to be a football coach. Being a bigot authoritarian helps, apparently. Because we have to understand, coaching isn't just about coaching on the field. It's not just about molding young men. It's also out there getting out there and trying to get money from alumni and everybody. So he's got to, put on a tie and a sports coat and go out there and raise some funds. And I guess if you're in the South and your alumni expects a certain amount of, shall we say, school color, being a bigot authoritarian helps. They'll throw money at that. All right. I remember my father railing against the inflation of importance at the athletic departments back in the day. He liked teaching at a school that really didn't have that, even though he taught at Oregon State University, which has a fairly established athletic department. Then he goes to Cal State Fullerton, which is now the university baseball capital of the world. Basketball for a while there, too. But I just remember him railing against the athletic department and how much importance was bestowed upon them. But you didn't really see any, any great recruitment for, scholarships for the humanities, shall we say. Yeah. I always thought that for every athletic scholarship they put out there, they should also back it up with a scholarship in the physics department or the history department or, hell, even the arts department. How about that? But no. They got to go where the money is, because apparently there's not a whole of a lot of TV money following the history scholarship recipient. Apparently not. Well, with that stated, why don't we stop this rant? Because actually, I got to get my mom to her doctor's appointment pretty darn quick. So let's make sure that we get through and get out of here right on time. I have to. What's on the rest of the menu? Well, at the top, yes, the blatantly racist remarks from the right has been met by complete silence from Republican leadership. So much so that Marjorie Taylor Greene seems to be moving up in GOP circles as the new it girl. On the rest of the menu, a dark money right-wing think tank is dumping millions of dollars into the Ohio Supreme Court races. Let's be clear. The Nazis didn't get the enabling acts by not packing their courts. A conservative small business advocacy group filed a new lawsuit to block the Biden administration's efforts to forgive student loan debt for tens of millions of Americans, because it's always about the cruelty. And 5 California tribes will reclaim their right to manage coastal land significant to their history, backed with $3.6 million in state money, and I got to tell you, that's good news. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Amazon said it will invest $972.1 million to add thousands of more electric vans, long-haul trucks, and cargo bikes to its delivery network in Europe. And the head of Germany's National Cybersecurity Agency is under investigation for ties to Russian intelligence. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly, and everything else that you do as well here at Netroots Radio. If you out there in radio listening land would take a gander to the left from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then hopefully notice the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford to send I don't know, how about what you might spend on an espresso type coffee drink once a month? If you could afford to do that, it really helps us pay our bills. And then we have found that when we pay our bills, we can fly under the radar, because that technology is still in existence, of course, and continue this powerhouse of resistance against dark forces arrayed against not only representative democracy here in the United States of America, but around the world. It's a worldwide effort of right-wing fascism, because that's how fascism is. And we are but a small bulwark against it, but oh, are we mighty. And we have you to thank for your generosity in allowing us to be oh so mighty. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and a hell of a lot more. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary. It will always be a diary to me, always. Anyway, I post the show notes and links diary on my page there at Daily Coz, and that's where the full articles can be had. So follow me on Twitter, and then you can get access also fairly quickly to those show notes and links at my Daily Coz diary. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay. There's no podcast engine named etc., as far as I know. But if there is, we'll be there. Because we're everywhere. All righty. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Yes. I should remind folks, roasted corn goes in all of the chowders here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It's almost like a signature type of ingredient. Anyway, Matt Cohen of the American Independent brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Republican State Leadership Committee, a right-wing political organization known to funnel millions of dollars in dark money to down-ballot GOP candidates in pivotal state races, made an eye-popping announcement on September 29th. It reserved $2 million in TV ads in Ohio to support 3 Republican state Supreme Court candidates. The RSLC describes itself as the biggest organization of Republican leaders at the state level whose core mission is to help elect GOP candidates in competitive state elections. Maybe they need to have the N-word applied to them, like Nazi, so that we have a better understanding of what they are doing. Each election cycle, the group pours millions of dollars into state races in an effort to consolidate the Republican Party's power within state legislatures and courts. The RSLC in recent years has gradually increased its spending in judicial elections, a significant escalation in efforts to influence key state Supreme Court races, especially in Ohio, where the future of abortion access and redistricting hinges on the outcome of these elections. We've never documented the RSLC spending more than around $2 million in any one state. Douglas Keith, a counsel in the Brennan Center's Democracy Program, told the American Independent, but we're already seeing in Ohio a single set of ad reservations for $2 million doesn't even speak to the cost of making these ads or any mail that they're involved in or any other kinds of voter contact. Keith said, the RSLC is probably gearing up to spend much more than $2 million in Ohio, especially given that it typically spends around $5 to $6 million in total on judicial elections across a number of states. A spokesperson for the RSLC told Cleveland.com in September that the organization plans to spend at least $5 million on state Supreme Court races around the country this election cycle. State judicial races, especially state Supreme Court elections, have become increasingly contentious and expensive over the past few election cycles, as the U.S. Supreme Court rolls back civil and voting rights by striking down entirely or in part rulings in such cases as Roe v. Wade and Shelby County v. Holder, decisions in cases of civil liberties, reproductive rights, and voting rights are given to the states to make. As a result, right-wing special interest groups such as the RSLC, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Judicial Crisis Network, and others have poured an unprecedented amount of money into state judicial elections in recent years. The Republican State Leadership Committee is known as a dark money machine. Its top donors in the 2020 cycle were the Judicial Crisis Network, a conservative judicial think tank that does not have to disclose its financial contributors, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and a number of energy and pharmaceutical corporations. For Keith, the RSLC's recent ad buy in Ohio is a key indicator of how much money outside groups are putting into high-stakes, down-ballot judicial elections in states such as Ohio and North Carolina in order to push a conservative agenda on the courts. It suggests that the amount of money that these outside groups are putting into high-stakes elections like Ohio may be more than we've ever seen before, Keith said. I wouldn't say that in 2022 national records are going to be broken, but there very well may be records broken in individual states. And Ohio, it's quite possible, will be one of those states. Jill Colvin of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A small business advocacy group has filed a new lawsuit seeking to block the Biden administration's efforts to forgive student loan debt for tens of millions of Americans, the latest legal challenge to the program. The suit, filed by the Job Creators Network Foundation, argues the Biden administration violated federal procedures by failing to seek public input on the program. It's one of a handful of lawsuits that have been filed by conservative business groups, attorneys, and Republican lawmakers in recent weeks as the Biden administration tries to push forward with its plan to cancel billions in debt before November's midterm elections. Elaine Parker, president of Job Creators Network Foundation, slammed the program as executive overreach and complained that it does nothing to address the root cause of rising debt, the outrageous increase in college tuition that outpaces inflation every single year. Well, how about the usury rates that credit cards and loan companies charge? How about that, lady? The Job Creators Network Foundation has previously turned to the courts to try to block the Biden administration's COVID-19 vaccine mandate on businesses. It also sued Major League Baseball in 2021 for moving the All-Star game out of Atlanta over objections to Georgia's voting laws. That lawsuit, which cited losses to local businesses, was later dropped. The new lawsuit is one of a growing number of legal challenges trying to halt the proposal laid out by President Joe Biden in late August to cancel up to $20,000 in debt for certain borrowers. 6 Republican-led states filed suit late last month, accusing the Biden administration of overstepping its executive powers. Meanwhile, a federal judge in Wisconsin last week dismissed a lawsuit from a local taxpayers group, the Brown County Taxpayers Association, that sought to block the program, ruling that the group did not have standing to bring the lawsuit. The group had argued that Biden's order unlawfully circumvented Congress's power over spending and said the plan was discriminatory because it sought to give particular help to borrowers of color. Sophie Austin of the AP brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. 5 California tribes will reclaim their right to manage coastal land significant to their history under a first-in-the-nation program backed with $3.6 million in state money. The tribes will rely on their traditional knowledge to protect more than 200 miles of coastline in the state as climate change and human activity have impacted the vast area. Some of the tribe's work will include monitoring salmon after the removal of a century-old defunct dam in the redwood forests in the Santa Cruz Mountains and testing for toxins in shellfish, while also educating future generations on traditional practices. The partnership comes 3 years after Governor Gavin Newsom apologized for the state's previous violence and mistreatment against indigenous peoples. Newsom said the state should allow for more co-management of tribes' ancestral lands. Megan Rocha, who's on the Tribal Marine Stewards Network's Leadership Council, said these coastal areas hold cultural significance for various tribes, making the partnership monumental. The network plans to create agreements between tribes and with state government for managing the areas. Rocha is also executive director of the Racine Rancheria, a tribe of Yurok people that is part of the network. She worked with other tribal leaders, members of nonprofit groups, and the state's Ocean Protection Council, which coordinates activities of ocean-related state agencies to develop a pilot program for the network that was years in the making. In 2020, Ocean Protection Council staff recommended the agency set aside $1 million toward the pilot program to support the network in conducting research, reaching out to tribes, and creating plans for the future. Leaders plan to expand the network to include more tribes throughout the state, Rocha said. California has 109 federally recognized tribes, the second highest number in the country behind Alaska. But there are also many tribes that are not federally recognized. Multiple tribal leaders referenced Newsom's public apology in explaining part of why the network's public launch is happening now. In recent years, U.S. officials have committed to collaborating with tribes on managing public lands. Creating a network of tribes to steward areas with the backing of state government, money, and nonprofit support breaks new ground in the United States, said Caitlin Gaffney of the nonprofit's Resources Legacy Fund. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, and welcome to COVID Quickly, a Scientific American podcast series.
This is your fast track update on the COVID pandemic. We bring you up to speed on the science behind the most urgent questions about the virus and the disease. We demystify the research and help you understand what it really means.
I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
And we're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today we're going to talk about how COVID has driven a notable decline in U.S. life expectancy.
And some new monoclonal antibodies that could protect us from variants. People in the U.S. have been living longer and longer during most of the past century. Then COVID hit, and all of a sudden we're going backwards. Why are we losing years of our lives?
Life expectancy has only declined a few times in recent memory. During the 1918 pandemic, during World War II, and during the HIV/AIDS crisis. But over the last 2 years, it's declined by almost 3 years. That's equivalent to the U.S. life expectancy in 1996.
That's really astounding.
It is. But while almost every demographic group saw a drop, some groups lost more years of life than others.
Which of those groups had the biggest declines?
Native American and Alaska Native populations lost a total of 6.6 years from 2019 to 2021. The Hispanic population lost 4.2 years. The non-Hispanic Black population lost 4 years. The white population lost 2.4 years, and the Asian population lost 2.1 years. These data come from the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics, which recently published provisional data for 2021. Elizabeth Arias and her NCHS colleagues calculated something called a life table. It basically takes a hypothetical group of infants born in 2021 and applies the real-world death rates of every group to those infants across their whole lives. The result is an estimate of the total population's life expectancy.
So what are the reasons for all those lost years?
Well, COVID was the primary cause. More than 1 million people in the U.S. have died from the disease. But unintentional injuries, mostly drug overdoses, were also a big reason for the decline. Deaths from heart disease, chronic liver disease, and suicide also contributed to this decline in life expectancy over the past year. Economists Ann Case and Angus Deaton first brought attention to these deaths of despair, deaths from overdoses, alcoholism, and suicide. They were already rising before the pandemic, which just accelerated the trend.
In other words, COVID pushed people who were already struggling over the edge.
Most likely. And this was especially true for the Native American population. Native American people have some of the poorest levels of housing, education, and healthcare in this country. And a lot of this stems from the U.S. government's colonialist policies, according to Crystal Lee, an assistant professor at the University of New Mexico's College of Population Health. Lee is Diné, a member of the Navajo Nation, and is also CEO of the nonprofit organization United Natives and the company Indigenous Health. We need to hold the U.S. government accountable by honoring the existent treaties, Lee says.
Those treaties would improve healthcare, among other things.
Exactly. I think the biggest take-home message here is really that we weren't prepared for this pandemic, and that we really need to revamp our whole healthcare system and make it work for everyone in this country if we want to stop this backsliding and live longer, healthier lives. Josh, we've talked about the several hundred people who are getting severely sick and dying from COVID every day. And some of the medicines developed to treat sick people don't work well against the new variants. You've been hearing about some drugs that might work better, though, right?
I have. The new drugs are variants themselves, versions of older medicines called monoclonal antibodies. They've usually got long, difficult names, but they typically end in MAB, so that's the giveaway.
For COVID, those have been around for a year or so, haven't they?
Yep. They were developed to glom onto the early 2020 form of the virus and prevent it from penetrating into a cell. And originally, they did a pretty good job.
Recently, not so much, right? I saw a study in which scientists tested 21 different MABs against the BA4 and 5 variants, and only one was able to neutralize them.
And that is precisely the problem. These MABs were configured to fit that early virus, like a key fitting into a lock. But now there are 5 or so newer variants making the rounds. BA5 is still the dominant one. And those have mutations that essentially change the shape of the lock. So most of the MABs don't fit anymore. One, called betalovimab, still does a pretty good job, but most of the others that have been authorized by the FDA do not.
So what's the solution?
To go broad. Scientists used to pick these MABs based on how strongly they attach to a particular virus. But now they're looking for antibodies that are broadly neutralizing. They grab onto a wider range of variants, not just one. I've been talking about this with Bill Hazeltine, the molecular biologist who worked on some of the original AIDS therapies. He thinks this approach is very promising. MAB developers are picking antibodies that take aim at what scientists call highly conserved regions of the virus. In plain English, that means spots that don't mutate from variant to variant, so the MABs can still lock on.
Can people use these now?
Not yet. There are about 10 of these MABs in various stages of testing. Some are now being tried on people, and some are still in animal tests.
But don't a lot of drugs that work well in animals actually fail when they get to humans?
Not MABs in general. The antibodies are often developed in mice that have been genetically modified to have human-like immune systems, a technique that goes back to the days of AIDS drug development. Because of that, they generally translate well to people, Hazeltine says. Another advantage MABs have is they can be used to prevent infection in people who are in high-risk situations. Some may be immunocompromised and don't get much benefit from vaccines, so MABs can play a prevention role for them. Others may work in nursing homes, which have had high rates of outbreaks.
I can see that. Look, I don't want to keep tossing out problems, but MABs aren't a pill like Paxlovid. They have to be infused, or at least injected. Doesn't that create an accessibility problem?
You're right. It's not like you can easily use these at home. But the injection technology is getting easier. And, just for instance, plenty of people with diabetes have learned to inject themselves with insulin. Now, cost will be an issue too. MAB manufacturers can charge just over $2,000 per dose. Right now, the government picks up the tab for COVID patients. It turns out, though, that MABs are actually cheap to produce these days, just over $100 or $200 a pop. So there is a chance we'll be seeing new and affordable therapies able to handle the range of variants that COVID keeps tossing at us.
Now you're up to speed. Thanks for joining us. Our show is edited by Jeff Del Vicio and Tulika Bose.
Come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of COVID Quickly, and check out SciAm.com for updated and in-depth COVID news.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
The problem with our so-called free market is that it's not free for you and me. It's largely controlled by monopolies, which are free to inflate prices just because they can, letting gougers gleefully extract unwarranted monopoly profits from us. This milking of consumers by tightly consolidated industries is propelling today's surging price hikes. Brand-name corporations claim they're being forced to mark up price tags just to cover rising costs for raw materials, labor, transportation, etc. But in a competitive marketplace, they'd have to eat much of those increases by taking a bit less in profits. Indeed, monopolies are now raising prices simply to squeeze even greater profits from hard-hit consumers, a game of corporate greed that socks America with more inflation. Consider diapers. A year ago, Procter & Gamble announced that the pandemic was driving up its production costs, forcing it to raise prices for its Pampers brand. At the time, it had just posted a quarterly profit of $3.8 billion, so P&G could easily have absorbed a temporary rise in its costs. But instead of holding the price to ease their customers' economic pain, the conglomerate used a global health crisis to justify upping diaper prices. 6 months later, P&G's quarterly profit topped $5 billion. And in that same quarter, P&G spent $3 billion to buy back shares of its own stock, a Wall Street manipulation that artificially bloats the wealth of top executives and other big shareholders. In short, P&G used the excuse of inflation to inflate the price of their diapers, then used the extra money it extracted to inflate the value of its stock to benefit rich shareholders. This is Jim Hightower saying, well, couldn't consumers just switch to Huggies, the brand sold by P&G's main competitor? No, for it's a co-monopolist, having also goosed up its prices.
Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. Vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. 50,000 people gathered in the small town of Mount Olive in southern Illinois. They had come to commemorate a new memorial to renowned labor leader Mother Jones and to honor mine workers who had lost their lives. 5 special trains and 25 Greyhound buses helped to bring the crowd to the Union Miners Cemetery. The cemetery was founded as a resting place for fallen miners. In 1898, in the town of Verdun, violence erupted. Remembered as the Verdun Massacre, 7 miners were shot dead at the hands of company-hired guns. 4 of the murdered miners were from Mount Olive. The miners were originally laid to rest at the town's burial plot, but the owners of the cemetery objected to the ceremonies that the union held there. So, the local miners' union purchased land and moved 3 of their brothers to the new Union Cemetery. When Mother Jones died at the age of 100 in 1930, she asked to be buried with her boys at the cemetery. The miners raised more than $16,000 for a monument. The 22-foot-tall obelisk is made of 80 tons of pink Minnesota granite. On the obelisk is a medallion bearing the likeness of Mother Jones. She is guarded on either side by a larger-than-life bronze statue of a coal miner with his sledge. In 2015, a crowd of 300 gathered for a rededication of the monument. Illinois AFL-CIO and the United Mine Workers of America spearheaded the campaign to raise $100,000 to restore the site. One of those who attended the rededication was Bill Falica, a local retired miner. He told a reporter, "Mother Jones is like a local hero. She wasn't afraid to stand up to the big shots like judges and politicians. She was just a hellraiser." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 51 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the mid-80s once again, nearly the same as yesterday. Plenty of sunshine with winds light and variable. Clear skies overnight, lows in the low 50s, winds remaining light and variable, and sunny tomorrow with highs inching near 90, winds light and variable. Ragweed pollen is rated high right here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 48 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at level 4. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.1 inches, visibility is at 8 miles, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 60 degrees and fair. Paris is 64 and sunny. Rome is 76 degrees and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 55 and sunny. Kabul is 60 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 75 and fair. Tokyo is 67 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and cloudy with a small craft advisory on the bay. And New York is 60 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Julia Hedero of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Amazon said yesterday, Monday, it will invest 1 billion euros, which is the equivalent of 972 million, to add thousands of more electric vans, long-haul trucks, and cargo bikes to its delivery network in Europe. The investment would grow the number of electric delivery vans the company has in Europe from roughly 3,000 to 10,000 by 2025. With the investment, Amazon is hoping to purchase more than 1,500 electric trucks, up from 5 in the United Kingdom. To accommodate those vehicles, the company said it will build hundreds of fast chargers across its European facilities that can charge the vehicles in roughly 2 hours. Amazon has launched 25 micro-mobility hubs, or more centrally located delivery stations in dense European cities that allow the company to try out different delivery methods, such as bike and foot deliveries. It said it expects to double those hubs by 2025, which will allow the company to take more delivery vans off the road. The retailer has already ordered 100,000 electric vans from Rivian Automotive, which issued a recall last week for almost all its vehicles in order to tighten a loose fastener. In a recent security filings, Rivian said it planned to deliver the vehicles to Amazon by 2025. Amazon has said it plans to roll out those vehicles to more than 100 cities by 2030.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous staff at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The head of Germany's National Cybersecurity Agency is under scrutiny over reports of ties to Russian intelligence. Arnie Schönbaum, who heads the BSI agency, co-founded a cybersecurity group a decade ago that brings together experts from public institutions and the private sector. German media reported that one of its members is a company founded by a former Russian intelligence agent. There is growing concern in Germany that the country's critical infrastructure might be targeted by Russia because of Berlin's support for Ukraine. On Saturday, an apparent act of sabotage forced German rail company Deutsche Bahn to halt passenger and cargo trains across the northwest country for nearly 3 hours. After the nearly 3-hour suspension, Deutsche Bahn said the problem, a failure of the digital train radio system, had been resolved, but some disruptions could still be expected. It later said the outage was caused by sabotage. Transport Minister Volker Wissing said cables that were essential for handling railway traffic safety were deliberately severed at 2 separate locations. He said Germany's federal police were investigating the incident. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.